Hey everybody, a friend of mine and I are doing a study of the life of David rather, and one of the things that we're doing at this point, we're just starting out the study, is we're doing the kind of a background study, because you can't really study David and get the full benefit of his life unless you're looking at the story of Saul. Saul was the king that came right before David in Israel. And one of the things that I noticed this morning that just really struck me, and I guess I'd kind of known it, but it hit me a different way this morning. David was called a man after God's own heart. If you know anything about the story of David, it's amazing he was called a man after God's own heart, because David was amazing, but not in a good way. I mean, he was a bad father. He was a bad husband. He had an affair with his friend's wife and killed his friend to try to cover it up. His daughter got raped and he ignored it. It's just, he just was not a good guy. And yet God calls him a man after his own heart? Really? And then there's Saul. You know, Saul was the first king, Mr. Insecurity. And Saul was the kind of guy where he just never really got a grasp of who he was. And so anyway, this morning we were reading this story about Saul. And Saul was getting ready to go to battle, and his army was ready to go. He was ready to go there, waiting for Samuel, the priest, to be able to come and offer the sacrifice. Because back then, the priest, who was almost like God, he was the ruler, he would come, he would offer a sacrifice, and then the army would go into battle. Well, Saul was waiting and waiting and waiting for Samuel. Samuel said, "Wait for me. I will come. I will do the sacrifice. You can't do that." And Saul waited and waited and waited. Some of his army was leaving because they were afraid. Others were leaving for who knows what reason. He was seeing his army dwindle. He was seeing the enemy in front of him. And he thought, I can't wait any longer. I cannot wait for this dude to come and offer the sacrifice. So he offers the sacrifice instead of Samuel doing it, which was a huge no-no. And Samuel comes as he's offering the sacrifice, and Samuel says, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to be offering that sacrifice. That's my job. You've been disobeying God." And Saul says, "Well, it's not my fault. You were late." The difference between Saul and Samuel is this, and I think this is a difference for a lot of us people. Every time Saul did something wrong, and Saul did a lot of things wrong as king, he would always find somebody else to blame. It wasn't his fault. Saul always loved to play the victim. And you and I know people like that. Maybe you've been like that, where you find your first effort, or when you're attacked or accused or something, the first thing you do is find somebody else to blame, because this isn't your fault. You wouldn't do this if they didn't do that. And that's kind of Saul's attitude. David, on the other hand, I think the reason he was called a man after his own heart, God's own heart, is because David, when he was confronted with his sin, he said, "Yeah, you're right, I'm guilty." David had an affair with his friend's wife. He killed his friend to cover up the affair. The prophet of God comes to David and says, gives David a story and all that, and he accuses David. He says, "You are the one that is guilty." And David says, "You know what, you're right, I am. I'm guilty." And David constantly went back to God and just said, "God, I am so sorry, I am so sorry, I am so sorry." Here's the difference between a man after God's own heart and a man that's against God's own heart. A man after God's own heart, man, woman, mankind, is somebody that confesses and owns up to their own sin. And you know what? It is so easy for us. I mean, I fail constantly, but failure happens in all of our lives. It's not whether or not we fail that is an issue. It's what we do in the face of that failure. If we fail and we try to blame other people for it, then we have not really addressed the issues within our own life. So my word for you today is to first of all realize your failure isn't too much for God to handle. And then the second thing is, come to Him, confess to Him, and let Him heal you. Thanks for listening in. Have a great day. Would love to have you follow my channel and share this. Thank you. Bye.